Gourdon School Maggie Law Project. This film is about how the school curriculum comes alive through active learning. The film documents how a project, initially about the Maggie Law surfboat, with a primary 5 class led by their teacher, Mrs. Susan Madden, and supported by myself as head teacher and other members of staff, grew organically and became all-encompassing. Prior to beginning the project, Susan had done all her background research. However, it was when we both brought in our family trees, we both have a connection with Gourdon, that we realised that a vague family relationship was in fact more recent than we had thought.
And we found at one point on this one that this was my family down here, and they lived in Queen Street. They lived at 7 Queen Street, Gourdon, and next door were Mrs. Japp's ancestors as well. They lived at 6 Queen Street, Gourdon, and this was on the census from 1861. And they were all fishermen in Gourdon a long time ago.
The children were entranced and delighted to see that their 2 teachers were related and could follow the family trees down the generations to the people who teach them on a daily basis. The second moment of real lift-off was the real stories. Susan's family story of loss at sea, and mine of a loss of a family boat, and the children being able to see from the family tree the relationship of the people in the stories to the storytellers.
It was really important for the children, I think, to realise that these were real people that had lived in the village and that had strong connections to the village, and that Mrs. Jaff and I had similar stories in the past where we had experienced losses at sea in our families, and the children could see that these were real because the people were on the family tree, and you could see the dates when they would be alive and when they died, and they could see what had happened then to the next generation of the family.
This project went in a huge way in reconciling the village, in that the pensioners were really in and out of the school a lot during this time. It had started a few years beforehand when we'd had our 50th anniversary of the school, but it really opened the doors to the pensioners coming in. And that has had a huge impact on the school, and I also believe in the wider village. This was a very powerful learning tool, which made the connection of the history of Gourdoners past and present totally come alive. The true stories continued when I brought in a photograph of my great-granny baiting her lines at the old granary building and telling the children that she actually died doing just that. They were quite fascinated. We also heard an old audio tape of Sarge Cargill, a local character, speaking about his wartime exploits and the fact that he was on the Carpathia and helped rescue people from the Titanic.
You were actor and the helmsman.
I was at the wheel when we got the SOS. We got the SOS about 11:30, I believe. And so we just went right straight to the place, you see. And we landed there about 4 o'clock, just the first of daybreak coming in.
How long did it take to sing?
She wasn't to be seen when we got up there at 4 o'clock in the morning. So they didn't get very much chance at all. And then we've seen all the small boats, you know, and lying in the water and people in them, and icebergs all around there. So we picked up all that we could. In fact, we picked them all up. She was alive. I think about 705 or 708 or something like that.
What was the sea like? What was that sea like?
The sea was just as calm as, just like glass. It was just absolutely just like glass. Oh, there was ice. There was an iceberg. It was a field anyway, about 30 miles long anyway. Well, you'd have just thought that the Lord had put everything down, but let us get the passengers on board.
These true stories were used to produce extended writing pieces, which we realised could be made into a book and sold in aid of the Maggie Law Museum funds, taking the project to another level altogether. The production and publication of the book went wild, with copies being sent to gardeners across the world. This generated a serious interest in the village about the project and the beginning of a relationship effect, probably the most enduring and important of the project. I mean by that relationships between teachers and pupils, teachers and teaching staff, children and parents and grandparents and neighbours, connections using networks of friends, all enriched by the use of books, newspaper cuttings and real artefacts such as a shieling blade, a skull used in the line baiting process, and even a Titanic medal. These webs of connections grew to include areas around the village. For example, I took the children to the War Memorial to show them my great-uncle's name, and then looked at names on the memorial that I knew were relations of theirs. Some surnames are very closely linked to the village, like Cargill, Lowney, Taylor. This was another real link to the past through me and through the children.
The children were given the opportunity to use a range of different media, such as text processing packages, digital cameras, recording devices, and handheld video cameras to film themselves reading from their own scripts.
Further down the road, we passed the local cemetery. It is called Birdie Cemetery, although it is situated in Gourdon.
In the 1870s, the mission hall was used as a day school. More than 200 children attended, and there was only one female teacher who taught 100 in the morning and the same again in the afternoon.
Across the road from the park, you can see the village war memorial at the bottom of Selby Place. It commemorates the local men who died during World War I and World War II.
Walking through the village, looking at street names and buildings that have been something else in the past, for example, the old lifeboat house, the bakers, the garage, the old post office, the children attracted attention and some of our residents came out to share information. The children were further pulled into the history of their village through those connections. For example, the old lifeboat shed has a family with 4 children at school now living in it. On one of our village walks, some of our local senior citizens came with us and talked about life when they were young. The relaxed manner of the walk meant that the adults spoke initially in polite speak, which quickly developed into the local Gourdon tongue.
Well, years ago, the water supply in Gourdon wasn't very great, and nearly everybody carried their water. So some days they didn't have much water, and this always run with water. So they used to come along here and fill bottles and kettles.
And you took her in water through the cold well?
I took her in the flasks of water.
And she enjoyed it?
Oh, she enjoyed that.
During the 19th and the 20th centuries, Gourdon was a busy fishing community and many local people made their living by going to sea. Whole families were involved in the fishing industry and it was a hard life for the fisher folk of the time. Line fishing was used to catch haddock, cod and whiting. The fishermen used a line with 1,200 hooks which were baited with mussels. The women shelled and baited the lines at home and laid the lines in a basket called a scull, ready for the men to take to sea.
Gourdon Harbour is not quite so busy with fishing boats nowadays, but there are still a few boats that go out regularly to catch fish or to put out creels for crabs and lobsters. Around the harbour you can see several fish houses and curing sheds. The catches are proceeded at the quayside and fresh fish and shellfish can still be purchased daily in the village.
The expertise and knowledge of the teacher and members of local staff, local to the village, recognised another potential learning experience. We collected as many old Gourdon words as we could via the community and wrote another bestseller, Gid Gourdon Words, which we sold for our school funds. The ripple effect continued. The Titanic story was sent to the new Titanic Museum in Belfast. They were absolutely delighted to get an additional piece of information which they had not known about to add to their collection. The children designed, evaluated and made games for use by other children who will visit the Maggie Law Museum.
Why did you decide to do this type of game?
I decided to do it like that because it was kind of linked to the Maggie Law because of the lifeboats and the sea animals.
Did you enjoy making this game?
Yes, but it took me quite a while because I had to do all the colouring in and the sums.
This game is called Gourdon Galleon Chase and it's a game for 2 to 4 players. The objective of the game is to be the first player to reach the finish by an exact throw of the dice.
What is this game?
It's a word search and there's words up at the top and you have to look for them. When you find it, you either score out the word or tick beside it.
Did it take you long?
No, it didn't. It only took me about 15 minutes.
They wrote and recorded songs for a CD with local singer-songwriter Dave Ramsey, the CD to be sold in aid of the Maggie Law funds. We danced a dance which I wrote called the Maggie Law, each of the steps representing a story of part of the boat. The dance itself is danced with 9 children in the shape of the boat. You see them turning at the bottom. This is to represent the capstan, and generally the teamwork of the dancers mirror the teamwork of the men. You see the children joining hands on the side. This shows the ropes that hang on the side of the lifeboat. The close connection with the community was further strengthened and enriched by the understanding and respect for Gourdoners of the past and of the present. This was demonstrated recently when one of our pupils cleared an old lady's path of snow. She was so touched that a young lad would do that for her when previously she would have been fearful of youth. The children now have a much greater understanding of the importance that the sea played and continues to play in the life of their village, and the impact of what can happen at sea to people they know.
The red stone building used to be from the Gourdon lifeboat station. It was in use from 1878 until 1969. You can see the letters RNLB.
At the side of the harbour is a recently renovated Thacker monument. This was erected in the memory of a local man, Lieutenant William Thacker, who was lost at sea off the coast of China in 1864.
Can you see where the rope's been worn it through? But what happens when rope is really tight and being pulled against wood is that it tends to go on fire. So you always had to have somebody standing with a bucket throwing water on to stop the big block going on fire.
This is the site of the boatyard where James Mowat built the Gourdon surf boat, the Maggie Law. The railway line ran through the village and was a vital transport link for villagers between 1865 and 1966.
However, it is through the in-depth knowledge and understanding of the village and all its nuances, along with more general knowledge of the facts behind the project, that the class teacher, Susan Madden, was able to direct the children's learning to the very best effect.
Through this project, the children gained a better understanding of the heritage of the community in which they lived, and they felt that the work they had produced was a way of further preserving the history of their village for future generations.
Her dedication and hard work came from a desire to add something positive to the history of our village and to take the children with her on the journey, leaving a rich legacy of good old Gourdon for those who come after us. This connection will now be felt with other fishing villages across the world, and all the more real because of the active learning achieved through this project about and through their own village of Gourdon.